What's going on? Welcome to the episode. Today we're going to be talking about longevity because most folks want to live long, full lives. Not just long, not just full, but both. So we're going to start by defining the difference between lifespan and healthspan. Lifespan is simply how long you live, and healthspan refers more so to the quality of those years that you have. So ideally what we want is a long lifespan with a long health span, but unfortunately nowadays we've got relatively long lifespans, but a lot of folks are lacking in the health span department because they may slowly deteriorate for a decade or two, potentially even more. And I'm sure that you know or have known some people like this. Now, worldwide life expectancy right now on average is 73.2 years, with women clocking in at an average of 75.6 years and men at 70.8 years. So on average, women live about 5 years longer than men, and there are a myriad of reasons for that, but there's definitely a difference there. 5 years is a lot, right? Now, fun fact, the longest living country currently is Hong Kong, and their average life expectancy is 85 years. So that's a full decade longer than the worldwide average, which is huge. Now, Hong Kong is technically considered a country, which I didn't know until I looked up that stat because I thought it was just a part of China, but apparently it's a special administrative region of China. So you learn something new every day. So what do people typically die from? The big three, which are heart disease, cancer, and neurodegeneration. And neuro refers to the brain, and degeneration is essentially decline. So Alzheimer's and Parkinson's would be examples of neurodegeneration. Basically, what this means is if you live long enough, meaning you don't pass away suddenly from something, one of the big three is most likely going to get you. Now, being that that's the case, the question becomes, how do we essentially delay getting these conditions? How do we live a long, fully functioning life and then ideally pass away in our sleep in our 80s or 90s while having like a sex dream hypothetically or something? Let's dig into that. First of all, from an evolutionary standpoint, we are not designed to think very far down the line, meaning our brains are wired to figure out and focus on how to survive right now because we evolved in a very different environment than we find ourselves in currently. Problems for our ancestors revolved more so around things like food access, infection, and shelter, whereas we've got food access, shelter, and infection covered for the most part. We've actually got too much food. More folks die from eating too much than too little these days. So the pendulum has swung in the entire other direction in regards to food availability specifically. Modern medicine and drugs are super new technologies in regards to our evolutionary history as well, and they're a massive part of the reason why we live so much longer than we used to. In many cases, because they actually buffer bad habits. But regardless, on average, modern medicine extends lifespan, not necessarily health span, but lifespan. For example, if you develop type 2 diabetes, you can take something like metformin. If you develop high blood pressure, you can take a statin. If you develop an autoimmune condition, you can take immunosuppressive drugs. Now, you could alter your lifestyle to improve all of these conditions as well. However, let's be honest, taking a pill is far easier from a behavioral standpoint. So these drugs are all super new technologies that also have serious side effects as well, but that's a whole nother podcast in itself. Now, in the Paleolithic days, life expectancy was something like 30 years. However, that number is fairly misleading just because things like infant mortality were so common. Also, infection was a massive problem. And so if you hypothetically compare two people in those days, one person that lives until they're 70 and another that dies at birth, the average is 35 years, right? So hunter-gatherer life expectancy can be misleading when you look at averages, but either way, modern medicine has come a long way, especially in regards to birthing practices and, like I mentioned, infection. Point being, as far as looking down the line goes, we have to go out of our way to think long term and set ourselves up for success in our later years, being that our environment is so different now than it was for the vast majority of our evolutionary history. We have to be proactive in regards to our health because tomorrow's problem eventually becomes today's problem at some point or another. So how do we do that? How do we take the bull by the horns in regards to our health and live long, fully functioning lives? So we're active, we're mentally sharp, and we're maximizing our experiences unimpeded. It turns out that being overweight increases the likelihood for all of the big three that I just mentioned. So heart disease, cancer, and neurodegeneration. So nutrition, movement, and sleep are vital components of living a long, full life. Shocker, right? So ideally, what we want to do is create as much runway, as I like to call it, with our health as possible in order to create more wiggle room as you age. So what is runway? Essentially, if you're in your 30s, 40s, or 50s, and you've already got health issues, what is your health status going to be like in your 60s, 70s, or 80s? Having problems early is essentially the fast track for that slow and steady decline that we just chatted about, unless you choose to change your lifestyle. So in this scenario, you may get the lifespan aspect to things, but you're not going to capitalize on the health span front. Now, creating runway is essentially really prioritizing your health now, so that even if you do decline some as you age, you've got a lot more wiggle room to do so while still maintaining a higher level of functionality as you grow older. For example, if you're pre-diabetic in your 30s, 40s, or 50s, man, that's going to be a big issue if you plan on living into your 70s or 80s from a quality of life standpoint, because the body can only handle so much, meaning if you can delay that pre-diabetic state until your 60s, 70s, or 80s, you've got so much more runway at that point. You've essentially bought yourself time and, more importantly, quality of life. The same idea applies to something like blood pressure. If you've got high blood pressure in your 30s, 40s, or 50s, yikes, right? Again, the body can only handle so much. So there is a massive difference between developing high blood pressure when you're in your 40s versus your 60s or 70s. In the latter example, you've created a lot more health runway for yourself. Community and social connection is also a huge part of this longevity puzzle, because if you don't have folks that you love to share this life with, I mean, shit, what's the point, right? Life is essentially all about relationships and connection. Purpose is another massive component to longevity, and this is one reason why I'm not sure that I'll ever formally retire, just because I love what I do, and what would I do with my day otherwise? Vacations are awesome, but I'm always excited to get back to my regular routine afterwards because it just gets old pretty darn quick. Now, that's just me. You may approach things differently, and that is awesome. But either way, whether you choose to retire at some point or not, you need to have purpose in your life. Otherwise, it's similar to the community and social connection aspect in the sense that you're going to be asking yourself, what's the point of all of this? How am I contributing? Also, it's worth mentioning that purpose doesn't have to be work-related. You could find a ton of purpose in hanging out with your grandchildren, in traveling, volunteering, working on your golf game, whatever it may be. Humans need purpose, and when we don't have it, the general feeling that we're left with is dissatisfaction, dullness, and a what's the point sort of feeling. Whereas if you have a distinct and defined purpose, you know how you're contributing and why you're here. That way, you've got a clear reason to wake up each morning and feel excited. Now, I am of the opinion that taking really good care of yourself is not only the most loving thing in regards to yourself as an individual, but also to your family. Because if you begin to decline, and especially if you start to decline health-wise earlier in your life, who is going to pick up the slack? Who's going to take care of you? Probably your family, right? do you want to put that on them, or do you want them to live their fullest life, follow their passions, and experience as much as they possibly can? And the coolest part about this is that if you're taking great care of yourself, you can do all of that stuff with your friends and family. So essentially, loving you is loving them. As corny as that sounds, it's just true. So, nutrition, movement, sleep, community/social connection, and purpose. These are the keys to both lifespan and, even more relevant these days, in my opinion, health span. Nutrition-wise, favor single ingredient whole foods that you cook yourself, and I'd recommend keeping your body weight in a healthful range, as well as your body fat, of course, and really prioritizing digestion, because inflammation stems from the gut, and inflammation is no bueno for living a long, full life, as I'm sure you're aware. Movement, hit 10,000 steps per day. And if you want to work out on top of that, that is amazing, but by no means do you have to. Simply staying active is the key on the movement front. You also want to be sure that you can do a few basic lifestyle activities like picking up a suitcase and throwing it in an airplane overhead bin, getting up and down off of the ground so you can play with, grandchildren, carrying 20 to 30 pounds worth of groceries, just everyday stuff that makes life a lot more seamless on a day-to-day basis for you. Sleep. Get your 7 to 9 hours per night, and ideally wake up without an alarm, feeling rested and alert each day. Anything that impacts your sleep negatively, definitely keep an eye on. So things like alcohol and other drugs, eating too close to bed, being mindful of stimulation via light and electronics like your phone, and getting your room temperature right is a biggie too. These things can go a long way. Now, sleep is very tightly correlated with neurodegeneration, specifically in regards to the big three, which makes complete sense. No one's brain functions better after a poor night's sleep, and when you compound that over time, brain issues arise. On the community and social connection front, hang out with friends and family on a regular basis. I don't need to tell you how to do this, you know the dealio. And in regards to purpose, do as much as you can of what you love. Life is short and regret is fucking heavy. You might be surprised that I haven't mentioned anything about stress management this far. And if so, good catch. If you dial in your nutrition, movement, and sleep, you're going to take a ton of stress, both literally off of your plate, and your ability to handle said stressors will go through the roof. For example, eating poorly, not moving enough, and lacking in the sleep department are stressful on your body in themselves. So if you're not doing these things, you're adding to both physical and mental/emotional stress in your life via not squaring these things away. Also, your ability to handle whatever life throws at you is going to be so much higher when you've got these three staples addressed. Having strong social connections and community are huge stress reducers as well, just because we're social creatures. And not only do we crave connection, we actually need it. Purpose adds yet another stress mitigator to the mix, because when you have purpose, you know that you're contributing, which means you've got just another reason to persevere through tough times. So in regards to longevity, you can totally implement things like meditation. Personally, I meditate 5 days per week. You can listen to music, you can run a bath, or whatever has you feel calm and centered. Just know that the most bang for your buck lies in the nutrition, movement, sleep, social connection, and purpose buckets. So be sure not to miss the forest for the trees in regards to your approach around stress in general. Now, you don't have to do all of these things today, right? But choose one thing and take one small action step towards it. So for example, if you're experiencing some health issues, or you just know that you're not feeling your best, make your next meal a really healthful one, or go for a 20-minute walk. Shit, you could make a healthful meal for dinner tonight and walk to a friend's place and share it with them. You essentially just ticked off the nutrition, movement, and community/social connection piece all in the matter of an evening. Also, if you're struggling with this stuff, ask for help because you've got one life. There are tons of great coaches out there that can provide you with a structured plan and accountability. And I'm not even talking about working with me specifically. Just get someone in your corner that has knowledge and expertise in this area that you don't, because you are that expert to someone else in your field. So, take one action step as soon as you turn off this episode. One small step. Make it happen. If you're interested in applying for one-on-one nutritional coaching and or workout design with me, you can click the link in the description below or head on over to n1fitness.com/coaching. Follow me up on Instagram at n1fitness. Friend me up on Facebook at Marcus Sadu. I just started posting on TikTok as well. I am at the N1Fitness if you want to check that out. Leaving a review on whatever platform you use really helps the pod grow and reach more folks. So if you're willing to do that, thank you so much. And if you've already left a review, amazing. I appreciate it. Lastly, be sure to hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you're using. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you found this useful, and I will catch you on the next episode. See ya.